Part 2. The elf looked appalled and whispered, "Don't do it, boss. You're not 300 anymore." The old man wasn't listening as he pushed himself out of the chair and settled his weight on wobbly knees. He shuffled over to the fireplace mantel and held his hands around a little carved reindeer. Scrunching his eyes, he made a great effort to do something, although I couldn't tell what. After several minutes of nothing happening, the old man rested on his elbows, exhausted. "Blast," he said in frustration, just as the elf dropped his tea tray. We turned around and I heard the old man say, "Oops." Amelia was drifting slowly up toward the ceiling like a leaky balloon. If a dog could look unamused, she did. And if a space ranger could look dumbfounded and thrilled at the same time, then I did too. Even a hard nut such as myself sometimes had to consider overwhelming evidence. Odd as it was, my mind was saying that I was fixing to get another rug pulled out from below me, but my eyes were saying that a dog was floating in the rafters. The tug of war inside me made me lightheaded, and through a fog of confusion, I heard myself say, "I have a wish." The old man's eyes lit up fully this time. The elf looked freshly appalled. "Don't do it, boss. It's been a long time. Let's just get you to bed." The old man waved him off and turned to look at me as if he was starving and I was a boysenberry pie. Like an old actor reciting lines from his youth, he said, "So, what would you like for Christmas?" I was already on the edge, so I leapt. "An official buck tweed, 2-speed, Crime Stopper, Star Hopper bicycle," I said. He frowned and looked at me as if I'd asked for a blue cantaloupe. I described my prize again, saying each word slowly and louder. He bent down over the back of the elf and cupped his ear, and I made it simple. "I'd like a tweed bicycle." "That's what you want? You're quite sure?" he asked, looking surprised. "I'm sure, a tweed bicycle. It's the latest thing." The old man straightened up and scratched his head. "I'll try my best," he said, grinning. I roped Amelia and hauled her down from the overhead beams. She was near emotional collapse during the walk home, but then again, so was I. On Christmas morning, I awoke to the air-colored pink, which I took as a sign of coming paradise. Slipping down the hall, I paused and crossed my fingers for luck before viewing the prize that would guarantee my happiness into old age. Amelia lay spread eagle and snoring on the rug, safely anchored to earth by a toaster and a Hoover vacuum cleaner. Our pitiful tree was tucked against the wall, looking lonely and pitiful as usual. Also as usual, there was no buck tweed bicycle. I searched the house and yard, confirming the worst. No bicycle. With a few flashy parlor tricks, the old humbug had steered me right into the same old childish quicksand, faith in a grown-up. My disappointment bubbled into anger, and I vowed out loud that Mr. Santa Phony Claus would feel the terrible wrath of the Red Ranger of Mars. Amelia wanted no part of rats and tried crawling further under the Hoover. But I scooped her up and stomped off in a rage toward the old house on Point Robinson. We reached the house, and I stormed in without knocking. I barely noticed the sheets covered the paintings and windows in the hall. I found the old phony upstairs in bed. But there were others in the room, more elves, a swarm of elves, a flock, a flood, a murmuring horde of puny, pointy-eared little old men stood about with their hats off. Although foggy-minded in my fury, I couldn't help but be impressed by such a sight. I affixed a double, deadly, Red Ranger evil eye on the old man in the bed. He breathed with a whistling rattle and opened his eyes when I stopped at the door. Boys, he wheezed, the Red Ranger has come calling. Looking at me, he said, "We're having a going away party, Red. These old friends were kind enough to see me off." His arms rose shakily outstretched. His eyebrows went high, as if waiting for some sort of wonderful news. "Come closer," he said, eyes glistening. "Tell me exactly what you thought of your special bicycle." Oh, I'd tell him all right. I paused to organize my fit. But as the steam built up and the vile words arranged themselves, a new emotion began to build, pushing aside my anger. I fought it back, but to my horror it kept coming. The Red Ranger of Mars, protector of the 23rd century and savior of grateful princesses, faced a new enemy: tears. As I think back now after so many years, it seems they came for more than just a bicycle beyond reach. But before they arrived, the old man's hand reached out towards my own. Years of brainless kid instinct obscured my emotions, and I grasped it. Even through my brimming tantrum, I noticed it was damp and trembling. His eyes stared at mine, looking for a word of Red Ranger approval. They seemed to beg for it, while old Sonder Claus was nervous. The sad, failing old man, whoever he was, truly believed he'd delivered me my Christmas wish. And then up from some unexplored crevice inside me, from a place I did not know, came something new in my experience. I opened my mouth and watched helpless as it all poured out. And here is my favorite picture of his angry face. The bicycle, of course, that bicycle. Sir, I have never quite had such a glorious machine in all my life. You may have noticed my face actually glowing just now. That was from pride. Using skills gained over a lifetime of telling whoppers, I launched into a soaring account of the adventures I planned aboard a bicycle that I knew I didn't have. His eyes blazed to life with each growing fiction, meeting each swoop from the truth with clapping hands and a triumphant woo-wee. After I finished, I sat back and winded from the torrent of joyful fibbery. I was feeling strangely happy. Well, it occurred to me I had no reason to be happy at all. "Let's go home," I said to Amelia, who jumped. She hadn't seen me smile before and figured I was having a seizure. As we turned to leave, I noticed that the elves seemed agitated. At the door, I looked back to see several of them trying gently to keep the old man in bed. Color had temporarily filled his cheeks, and he struggled to his feet. Grinning impishly, he motioned for silence, and then bent to elf ear level. He whispered, "Boys, we're back." The little men looked mortified. Turning to me, he smiled and said, "It's been a pleasure having the Red Ranger call." I saluted and said, "Then I'll call again." I meant it, but that's the last time I ever saw the old man. As I headed for the stairs, he had summed up the last of his strength and stood at the door, his arms outstretched. "Time to fly," he said. Slowly, every one of the gathered elves gently drifted out of his room and up towards the rafters. The expression on their faces looked similar to the one I'd seen on Amelia's the night before. We left, my head reeling. I discovered it on my way home that morning. It was in my front yard the whole time. I just hadn't thought to look up. Neighbors had also begun to notice and silently approached. If a dog could look flabbergasted, Amelia did. The morning breeze spun the front wheel lazily, where I stared up in open-mouthed astonishment. A shiny, brand new bicycle, custom made just for me, glimmering in the morning sun, piercing the trunk of Vashon Island's oldest fir tree. It sat there 10 feet up, pointing precisely toward the North Pole, as it would for the rest of all time. So not exactly a tweed bicycle, then surely a treed bicycle, placed there by a strange old man whose ears failed him, even before his heart did. In the days and years ahead, I would think often of how that useless bicycle had been an answer to both our wishes, my own being one I'd never admitted. But on that Christmas morning of 1939, I knew only that I needed to wake Aunt Vi and tell her how extremely fond I was of an old cast-off pajama top dyed Ranger red. 50 years later, if you ask if I'm making this all up, I'll say this: the word of the Red Ranger of Mars should be all you need. And if you ask if I believe in Santa Claus, I'll say this: mind your own business. And if you ask about that tree on a Christmas morning a lifetime ago, the one holding the last little bit of an old man's faith and the first of a sour-faced little boy's, I'll say this: it's still there today. And that is a real photograph of the tree, the bicycle in the tree on Vashon Island. That is the best part of the whole book. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I want you to know how much we miss you here at school, and we're so excited to see you after the break, okay? Have a wonderful Christmas. Happy holidays.